Hello, hello. Welcome to the first ever live class for the Borderless community. Oh my gosh, I am really excited about this. It's been a long time percolating in my head and day is finally here. So today we're talking about becoming the best partner, which is kind of an interesting topic, but to just get started with, I figure I should probably introduce myself for those of you who are here live today and those of you who watched the recording of this at a later date. So my name is Casey, hello, hello, and I am the founder of Borderless Stories. So the whole deal with Borderless Stories, why it exists in the first place, is that once upon a time, I was going through the initial days of being in an intercultural relationship with my now husband, who's from Turkey. And there were times when we both felt, the cultural differences that we had and the conflicts that they created made us feel isolated because there was nobody in our lives that we could directly relate to, right? There was nobody that I could say, hey, this is the thing that we're going through right now. And they would say, oh, yeah, totally, me too, right? So it was more likely that someone in my life would say, oh, I don't understand that. That sounds strange. That sounds bad, and judge it. And so we both kind of kept a lot of things to ourselves as a result. That's not good, right? Isolation is never the answer. So the idea here with this community is that we can have a space that is judgment-free, where you can come and you can share things with people who are going to be going through the same kinds of things, right? So here we are today, and I'm really pumped that we're getting right into this. So the idea here is that you also are in that same kind of situation, right? Where you're feeling isolated, you're feeling unsupported. So here in this community, we're going to do these classes once a month, and I'm setting aside 90 minutes for that. So I don't intend to talk at you for 90 minutes. Hopefully you'll have some questions or comments, and I'm happy to address those. And then we'll also be meeting again so we have these meetings, and then 2 weeks later, we have our Hot Seat Live coaching calls, where you can apply for a spot. You can have 30 minutes where you come with something that you're navigating, a challenge that you're facing, and we kind of work through it together, get feedback from the community as well. And if you're comfortable doing that on live video, awesome. If you're not, then you can do that anonymously as well. And I can read your question, and people can work through it together. So without further ado, let's get into today's topic, becoming the best partner probably ever. So you may have noticed that I have my handy little dry erase, not board, dry erase sticky on the wall here, and I drew a picture of an iceberg on it. This is my favorite, excuse me, favorite model for culture ever. Very excited to get into this thing. But to start off with, I'm going to share something that I read today, and I see it a lot. If you're on the internet, especially if you ever look at BuzzFeed articles, they love to do these little listicles about things that other people in other countries are surprised about Americans. Like that, they're like, this is weird and we think it's strange. And I love that when I saw it, because I was like, that is the perfect illustration of how we all think that our own culture is normal and nothing else is, right? Everything else is weird, is bad, whatever. But the idea, these articles that tell you, if you're an American like me, that say, hey, other people think it's really weird that like you smile all the time. And I could easily look at that and say, like, it's not weird, right? Like, it's not weird to me. I'm from the Midwest. We like to smile. But someone in a different country might say, no, you only smile at friends, family. You only smile when you're happy. You don't smile when you're just greeting someone, right? So that idea there is a great illustration. It's like, oh, maybe we can begin to explore what beliefs of ours are part of our culture, not even beliefs, but like behaviors as well. And then from there, start to realize that they're not better or worse than someone else's culture, they're just different. And I realize that many of you watching this are probably like, I'm way beyond this. Like I know, of course I know that other cultures aren't bad. I'm super into other cultures. But still, it's something that in our early stages of getting to know people, maybe when we first begin to travel, we might see something and think, that's weird. Like it's weird that you kiss people, or it's weird that you don't kiss people, or it's weird that you take your shoes off inside, or it's weird that you don't take your shoes off inside. Right? There are so many things that we could say, that's weird, that's bad. None of them are weird or bad, they're just part of the culture's values. They may be very different from your own because cultures may be very far removed geographically, so they don't have a lot of common overlap where things are coming from a shared history, but just different. Different is interesting, and it's why we're here. So we'll start here looking at this handy little metaphor. So this is culture, right? The culture iceberg. And I'm hoping that this video is not going to be backwards, because if I write culture here, I want you to be able to read it. Yeah, I think you can. If it's backwards, oh, sorry, I don't know what to do about that. But the idea is culture is an iceberg. This is a theory, a model put forth. I wouldn't say necessarily theory, it's a model, put forth by Edward T. Hall in 1976. And I didn't realize that. When I looked up the date today, it was like, wow, that's old. I know it's old because it's older than me. Shoot. But the reality is, like, at least as far as I understand, it still works. You know, there's nothing about it that I go, wow, that's really backwards and old. So sure, there are probably other models. This is just my go-to. This is my favorite. So the idea is, as you may know about icebergs, the part up on the surface is like significant. It's massive. You know, it's enough to like take down a ship. Ooh, too soon. But the part underneath the surface is even bigger, right? What does this have to do with culture? Well, the top of the iceberg, this is the stuff that you can see, right? This is the conscious stuff. See? Well, it says seen. And what's here is unseen, invisible. So I took some notes because I really wanted to get specific when I share this with you. So the things up above, this is behavior, right? All behavior is seen. Everything that we can see about a person's culture, it's not all behavior, sorry, but every behavior is something that we can see or something that we are aware of, right? We can look at the way someone dresses, we can look at the holidays they celebrate, we can look at how often they drink tea or coffee or whatever it is that's a chosen behavior in that culture, and something that's taught, that's passed down from generation to generation, right? This can include religious practices. Something that's explicitly taught is going to show up visibly. Beliefs kind of float here. They're like both above and below, because there are beliefs that are explicitly taught, but then there are also beliefs that are like implicitly learned from being a member of the culture. Maybe your religion is explicitly taught to you, like these are the 10 Commandments, or stumbling over my words here. These are the 10 Commandments, or these are the pillars of our religion. Whatever it is, that might be taught to you at your place of worship, or might be taught to you by your parents. But then there are other beliefs that you still might pick up from the culture around you that might have to do with gender roles, things that you see in pop culture that are like, you don't even necessarily realize that you're learning it, you're just sort of absorbing it by osmosis of like being around it all the time. And then down here on the bottom, values and thought patterns, right? This is what shows up here. Maybe we should write these things, right? So at the top, what do we have? Behavior, beliefs, and values, thought patterns. Wow. Fun fact about me is that I used to be a teacher. I used to write on the whiteboard every single day. I think my handwriting has gotten worse since I stopped teaching in a classroom. It's a shame. Ever since I was a little person, I thought the idea of writing on a whiteboard or chalkboard would be very cool. I feel like it's letting me down a little bit, but what else? So yes, values and thought patterns, again, things that are picked up by being a part of a culture. So these are the ones at the bottom are unconscious, the ones at the top are conscious, right? The ones at the bottom are very difficult to change, not impossible, but much more difficult. These are easier to change, right? It's like if your behavior habit is to drink tea every day, many, many cups a day, you can stop doing that. I know that from observation because my husband is Turkish, which you might know includes drinking a lot of tea. It just seems like it's attached with Turkish culture. The first time I went home to his village, I had a day where I drank 8 cups of tea, and then I laid in bed at night and my little heart was just like pounding 100 miles an hour. I was like, well, what's going on here? Am I dying? Nope, just way, way, way too much black tea. But anyway, he doesn't drink like any black tea now. I'm like, oh, look at that, he changed that. There are other things that are a lot more difficult to change. But again, when you start to explore that, then you can start to figure it out. And you may wonder, like, why am I talking about this iceberg here when it's like, it's about culture. You said today is about becoming the best partner probably ever. This is about like my culture, my partner's culture. Like, that's insane that why are you even telling us all of this stuff? So here's the thing though, what I think seems to be true to me in my experience, myself, with the clients, is that we're like this too, right? Like each individual also has this top part of the iceberg that is seen, visible, and then this bottom part that is unseen, invisible. It's a lot harder to tap into and to access. So we've got it for self, but we can say we also have it. We've got it for culture, but we also have it for self, right? So we also ourselves have behaviors and beliefs as an individual member of a culture, and then we also have these values and thought patterns. So what I am proposing in this class today is that the more we get into understanding this deep down stuff, the better we will be able to interact with our partner and to relate, to understand, to move forward, to make progress and make the world a better place by having these beautiful intercultural love stories going on, you know? So, yeah, let's dive into it. The metaphor that I like to think of here is that if we want to get to understand this, right? Maybe actually initially we don't want to understand ourselves. We look at our partner and we're like, why are you so weird? You know, like why do you do such strange things that I don't understand? Can you just be different? I don't know if anyone has ever thought that. I think it's human nature to think that at some point, right? Like, can you just be different? You know, or maybe you have the thought of like, it'd be easier if you were from my country, my culture. You know, it's like, I'm not going to judge you for thinking that. I think we've all thought that. I know, like, my husband and I have talked about this in the past. Like, sure, it would have been easier at stages if I were Turkish or if you were American. The reality is we're not. So what are we going to do about it? So what I suggest is that we put on our little scuba diving gear. Now, granted, there's an iceberg in the water, so you're really going to want to wear like a warm wetsuit, cover up like everything, or else you're going to get frostbite and you're probably going to die. But put on your warmest wetsuit, and as you go scuba diving down here, here's you. Oh, look at you. Aren't you cute? I'm going to give you a little smiley face because you're so happy. You're wearing a better scuba gear than that. He doesn't even have a mask on. But as you're down here, as you get down, further and further, and you're exploring this stuff and you're getting a fuller picture of it, maybe you can like turn and look and through like the water. It's probably a little murky, I would imagine. I don't know. Through the water, you can almost start to see the bottom of your partner's iceberg, right? You're like, oh, well, there's something over there. Huh. Because you've only ever seen this stuff from your partner, right? And you're starting to see that there's stuff underneath the surface. Now, I'm not suggesting that like when you go down here, you can see everything about your partner and you're like, aha, I know why you are the way you are. Because that's not a great approach to take in a conflict either, right? Like, you're like this because of your mother. No one has ever enjoyed being told that. So definitely do not tell anyone that. But as you get down there, you might be like, oh, okay, there's something there. I want to explore that. And then maybe you also see your partner who's also scuba diving. That's the coolest thing. If you're both way down in your own depths trying to learn about yourselves, you might like swim over and be like, meet up with each other and have like a really cool like underwater moment, like take off your regulators and make out. Probably don't do that because again, you might freeze to death. Don't really do this. Don't really go scuba diving on your icebergs, but at least appreciate the metaphor because it's like super legit, right? So let's get into it. How the heck do we do that? Yes, I do have a little notebook here because the reality is I'm talking to myself. So I have to keep some notes so I know what I'm talking to you about. So the first thing, learning about yourself. How are you going to do that? How are you going to explore this thing? Well, I don't think you can ever go wrong. Maybe I'm a little bit addicted to this kind of stuff. I don't think you can ever go wrong with learning more about yourself. There are a lot of great tools to do that. I don't think any of them are better than others. Maybe there's one that you love. For example, for me, I'm a big fan of Myers-Briggs, and as of late, maybe that's just because it's really trendy right now, and I'm sorry if I bought into a trend, but it's actually really interesting and accurate, I would say, is the Enneagram. So Myers-Briggs and the Enneagram, excuse me, and I can share with you all links to free assessments for both of those. Is assessment the right word? Maybe let's say like a quiz. So to get kind of an idea of yourself and understanding how you move through the world. So I have been told once or twice in my life by people who aren't into this kind of work, yeah, there's such a thing as too much self-awareness. You know, it's kind of like you get a little like self-absorbed when you're like always looking at yourself and you're like, ooh, what's so special about me? You know, I don't agree with that. I think the more you learn about yourself, it's not for the sake of being like, I'm the most rare personality type in the whole world. Did you know that? I'm very special unicorn. That's not the point. The point is to be like, oh, I perceive the world this way, or I move through the world in this way. So that might impact how we interact because maybe you perceive it differently or you move through it in a different way. And again, it's just like culture. Mine isn't better, yours isn't better. They're just different, right? So it's worth exploring that and learning what motivates us, what drives us, all of that kind of stuff. So like with the Myers-Briggs, for example, introvert versus extrovert. We all know this, I think at this point. It's been, you know, introverts like me use it as an excuse for being shy all the time, which is not accurate. It just means that you get recharged, you get energy from time spent alone, whereas an extrovert gets energy from time spent socializing, right? There can be shy extroverts, there can be shy introverts, like anyone can be shy, but knowing that kind of thing, that's a very basic thing to know. Maybe if you know, like, you're an introvert and you spend time alone, as an extrovert, it's not better or worse, but maybe you can accommodate that by saying, hey, sometimes I need to be at home alone, and maybe you should go out with your friends, or you should go out networking for your business, or whatever it is that you should do. I don't always need to be a part of it because it might really start to drain me, and then I might start to like start things with you, like get frustrated because I'm not being recharged. I'm draining myself of energy as we speak. You know, it's a real struggle. So that's just one component of Myers-Briggs. There's also intuiting versus sensing, feeling versus thinking, perceiving versus judging. There's a lot more to dive into with that. I'm not like a Myers-Briggs educator, but I think it's really interesting, and I highly, highly recommend it if you haven't tapped into it. Then you also have like the Enneagram, where you learn kind of about what your core motivation is and how that affects you. And it's really fascinating. There's only 9 types, so fewer personality types to work with in the first place. But just, you know, like, are you driven by the desire for perfectionism? Are you driven by the desire for me, it's for investigating, getting more information, right? And I'm like, well, that's kind of weird. Maybe I don't love that about myself. Maybe I wish that I was driven by perfectionism, and then I would be better at things or whatever. You just are what you are, you know, and it can change. Like you can do work on yourself to become the best version of any of these things. But the great thing about the tests and about the information out there is that then you can always find tools for how do I use this to relate to my partner or to my coworkers or to my kids or whatever. There's so much information out there because it's like you don't learn it just for the purpose of being like, I'm an investigator, you know, like I'm gonna hang out with my other investigator friends and we're gonna have a nerd off or something. Probably not gonna do that. But oh, maybe you're not driven by the same desire to like know everything to prove yourself. You're driven by a different desire, right? So that helps you to work on that. And yeah, what was I gonna say? Slipped out of my brain. I'm sure it'll come back and I'll tell it to you when it does. So yeah, that's one thing, right? First thing, just starting to learn some of these things. Oh, here's what I was gonna say. You kind of get some information when you can say like, oh, I know what I am and I know what you are, since we're both down here, we're both scuba diving. You can kind of type them into the old Google and be like, how do these 2 types work together? How does a 5 and a 9 work together? And how does an INFJ and an ISFP work together? And I may have just given you the exact information about my husband and myself, but I'm not totally sure about one of those. Who knows which one? As you Google that, or use whatever search engine you like, I don't care if you Google things or use Alta Vista if that still exists. But as you search that, you get information that's like tailored to you, basically, right? It's like if you search for your horoscope compatibility, but this is more based on your personalities, right? I'm not gonna say here like you should definitely look at your horoscopes. That's not something that I don't think it's based in science. I think it's kind of fun, but it's like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about learning about yourself and then seeing how those 2 things work together. A lot of great resources out there, which I'm going to happily share with you, especially if you're interested. So fun fact, I have a light shining up over here, and as I get too close to it, I feel like I'm sitting at a campfire telling ghost stories. So I'm really trying not to get too close to it because I was not that kid that enjoyed being told ghost stories around the campfire. Aha. Yeah, next thing I wanted to talk to you about is the idea of counseling or therapy or some kind of work, maybe with someone who's an expert, to get down into here and into understanding values and thought patterns. So this is something, you know, I'm kind of like of the belief that like therapy is good for everybody. I wish it was available to all of us. It's a great thing that I did for myself at one point, and I'm like, wow, that really helped. Sometimes even having a really close friend or family member who you can talk to about things that come up can almost be the same. If you have serious struggles with mental health, of course, I'm always going to recommend a professional. But if it's something where you're just trying to understand reactions that you have to things that are happening in your life and in your relationship, then working through, so thinking about some of the questions that a therapist would ask you or a counselor would ask you, where it's into more reflective kind of listening, you know, if you say something and you kind of can hear yourself say it and say, oh, why do I feel that way? Or what is it that makes me believe that? So starting to get a little deeper than just like, I'm frustrated with you because you're wrong or because you're different. Well, why am I frustrated? What is that? Is there something, where did this feeling first come from? Is there something like, is there a memory of a time when someone else did this to me and it really sucked? Or what is it? We're going to get into more examples later, and then hopefully any questions, any suggestions for like, oh, this is a good, let's talk about this sort of example that I've been confused about, whatever, welcome, anytime. Another thing, if it's not comfortable for you to talk to another person, always, and forever, I recommend journaling. Huge fan of journaling. I did it as a child, you know, in the way of like, today I ate a sandwich, you know, dear journal, which I would write in my journal, and then fill a full page just to tell my journal all the things I did today. You know, it felt really silly at the time. But now, after taking years off of journaling and starting to do it again, I realize how important it is to just get those creative juices flowing and get the thoughts and the garbage out of your head and start to solve it on paper. It's crazy how writing by hand, especially, like typing, not so much. Typing mindlessly, it really doesn't like tap into that same kind of like core part of you and of your, you know, feelings and thought stuff and like how all these things are, where they even come from, how they're working. But writing by hand, you know, you're like, man, I really feel like funky about, you know, this thing that happened with my family the other day or my partner the other day or whatever. As you start to write about it, you can say things to your journal that you can't say to another person, right? We're going to talk about how you talk to another person when you're working through conflict, but when you're talking to your journal, you don't have to like, you have to be nice, you have to sugarcoat it. You should make sure your partner doesn't find your journal if you're like over there writing like, man, I was frustrated with this jerk, what a turd. That's not, yeah, that's not good. If you need to write that, absolutely write it, but probably burn it because that would really stink for somebody to find that. I'm just imagining myself. I found a piece of paper that my husband wrote and he was saying I was a turd. I'd be like, well, buddy, we're going to talk about that. But by all means, write it, process it. Yes, maybe just throw it in your fireplace when you're done. That can be really healing. That can be really helpful. Yeah, so there's that. Someone, Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, talks about this practice called morning pages. So her suggestion, her practice that she did was writing 3 pages by hand every morning. And I think she used like, you know, A4, 8.5 by 11 size papers. I just use like a little journal, but just writing 3 pages first thing in the morning to kind of process the things that are in your head, get them out on paper, sort of make sense of them so you can go through your day then without that junk attached. It's really interesting. I found it really helpful. I did it consistently for a short time, but even in that time found that there were some major things that came up, like childhood kind of things with interactions with family members that I was able to resolve much more quickly because I was processing them myself. And so it helped me to identify why I was feeling the way I was feeling and then know how to say it to someone else. It's like rehearsing what you're going to say as opposed to just reacting in the moment when something happens and you kind of are like a little bit of like a cat response, like, ugh. You can't undo that, you know? Once you've hissed or swiped or whatever, it's too late. You can't rewind it, put it back in. So processing it on paper, and then when you go to that person, you can say, hey, I feel blah, blah, when you blah, blah. And that's the key, right? That I statement where you're identifying your feeling and what you think caused it, as opposed to going up to somebody that you love and saying, you did this, I didn't like it. Starting with that I statement, when you go and you're saying, you're making yourself vulnerable, you're saying, I felt hurt. I felt hurt when you asked me, you know, what did you do all day, in kind of that tone. Okay, too specific. Not talking from experience. This hasn't happened to me. I know, I realize when I share examples, it's really going to sound like, oh, she's just, you know, airing out her own grievances. No. But saying, I felt hurt when you questioned how I spent my time. I felt like you didn't believe in me. Putting it on myself, right? Sure, I did say you, and I did say like what it was that you did that made me feel that way. But I'm starting off by saying like, this is the reality. And the reaction that someone has to that is much more like, I want to comfort you. I want to reassure you. I want to work through this with you, as opposed to if you just went up to that same person and said, you were a jerk. You said something and it really hurt me and I didn't like it. Now, granted, I know my tone is different in both of those, but even the nature of the statement is going to make your tone different. I feel hurt. You can't really say like, I felt hurt when you did this. That doesn't feel, you know, like the normal way that you would say that. So yeah, I have a couple of examples I wrote down as I was thinking about this. So the I statements when you're navigating conflict. So one thing, for example, that might come up in an intercultural kind of relationship is if you are coming from two very differently valued cultures. So specifically thinking about like a more individualistic society culture versus a more family-oriented culture. And I think that this is a difference that many of us navigate, because it's something that's so deeply ingrained in us. Like for me, as an American, it's really in that, like, it's in everything, right? Like in pop culture, in textbooks, in books, in movies, in like conversations with family, in everything. It's more self-oriented. You know, it's more like, what do you want to do? What are your plans? Be yourself is even like what we say, right? That's just the focus. It's not like, what does your family want you to do, you know? As opposed to a more family-oriented culture, which is, again, that's like down here, that's a value. So a family-oriented culture where it's like generations live in the same home together, people really take care of their elders, all of that kind of stuff, that can really be a source of conflict, right? So let's say, for example, someone who's from a more individualistic culture may also feel, it might be harder for them to even stomach the idea of family, like the partner's family, being involved in decisions or certain information being shared with them, right? If you are really like, it's about me, it's about what I want to do, then that person might feel like if their partner is sharing that kind of stuff with family or getting into too much detail with family about things, then that individually oriented person might be like, I hate it when you do that, right? And that's a reaction. Like I'm not saying that's, yes, I started with the word I, but that's not like a good I statement. Just saying, I hate it when you do that. No way, Jose, like do not do that. But saying like, ooh, I felt really uncomfortable when, you know, you told your relatives about like our plans to have kids or not have kids, for example. Like I felt exposed, I felt vulnerable. As opposed to saying, oh my God, why in the world would you do that? Also, a similar kind of thing, thinking about money. Money is totally in this value place, right? Money stuff, we have deeply ingrained beliefs, like in our guts, in the cores of our being about money and like who deserves it, how we should get it, all of that kind of stuff. And if it's okay to talk about it. I know for me, in my culture, you don't talk about money. If someone gets a job, you don't say, how much money are you gonna make? If someone comes to your home, they can't ask you, how much do you pay for rent, right? That kind of stuff, it's like, oh, it's really private. It's really private. It's just a thing that we just don't talk about. That's not true everywhere, right? I know it's not. I know in other countries, people love to talk about money. It's not considered rude to ask those questions. I've been asked them in professional settings, which felt really strange to me, but it was like, oh, this is just different, right? It's not wrong. You're not invading my privacy. You're actually treating me like an equal, because you're asking me the same question that you would ask someone. You'd ask me if I were a different nationality, which is kind of cool. Again, kind of thing that like maybe information is shared that you don't want to be shared, and you, what do? Do you say like, ah, no, don't do that, bam, bam? Or do you say like, again, like, that didn't feel good to me, I didn't love it, that you had that conversation. What do you think? Like, how can we move forward? Making it a question, not saying don't do that again. I'm making the rules and saying like, this is non-negotiable, we cannot compromise on this. Compromise, I put the emphasis on a strange syllable there. We cannot compromise on this. No, right? Like, the nature of relationship is compromise, especially when you've got two cultures or more, possibly more cultures. When you're already blending those, when you're already navigating that, lots and lots of factors that you're gonna have to be willing to talk about, to discuss, right? Not every, or even most battles are worth fighting. So you gotta really, if you're gonna fight something, if you're gonna say this is really important to me, be careful how many things you try and say that about before you're gonna start being like, wow, she's, he or she is just the boss, and they have fixed, firm feelings about everything. Ugh, So in this, I would say, it didn't feel good to me. What do you think we should do moving forward? Like, what do you think is appropriate? And so understanding your own stuff here helps you then communicate it, which then might encourage your partner to start understanding it about himself or herself. And then once you both have that like depth of knowledge of your own self, you bring that together and you're like, oh, okay, so I feel this way about money stuff because I believed since I was a child that like money is really personal and really private. And then the partner's like, wow, that's really interesting, because you know what? Since I was a child, I believed that like money was just a thing that we all talked about, right? So it only works when you're down in this, apparently I think it's in your belly, but when you're down in this deep place of understanding, then the information that you share with each other is real. It's not just the repeated tapes that you say where you're like, this is good or this is bad.